Welcome to the Mindcraft Podcast. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and I have with me the amazing Russell Creed. Russell and I met each other in our mastermind group a bit ago, and I knew immediately I just had to have him on the Minecraft show because he's just such an interesting person. So Russell helps. This is what Russell does. Russell helps busy professionals calm the chaos in their businesses and lives. So let's welcome Russell Creed. Thank you for being on the Minecraft Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm super excited to be here with you and to share and just have a wonderful conversation.
That's exactly what it is, Russell. Russell is his interesting has interesting with all kinds of things. And today, Russell would like to speak about, and I am super stoked to hear it, the power of identity, meaning he's going to share with us his wisdom on how to redefine who you are and create what you want. Why don't you tell us about that, Russell?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you about that. And I'd love to share a little bit of my story with you, if I may,
Sure.
because it really is a story that helped me understand the power of identity. A lot of times as humans, we go around being busy, doing all kinds of things, and we tie up our identity in the things we're doing. Ask anyone, to tell them a little bit about yourself, and what's the first thing that people usually say?
What do you
Oh,
do?
I'm a banker. Or what do you do? I'm a banker. I'm a coach. I'm an actuary. That's where we usually associate who we are with what we do. And I was like that. I was a busy professional. I'm a trained actuary. For those that don't know what an actuary does, we use math and statistics to predict risk. Most actuaries work in the insurance industry, helping figure out how much insurance should cost. It's a weird product because you have to sell it before you actually know how much you're actually going to pay.
Right.
The insurance
Right.
company's going to pay. So it takes a lot of math and statistics to figure all those things out. And so that's what my career was. I was an actuary. At the time, actuary was the number one job in America. So I really had a view of myself as a high achiever, someone who struggled for success, because that's what was required. Success required struggle and effort. And to become an actuary is not easy. You have to take a series of exams. They're all self-study. They're highly competitive. A lot of people drop out of that process because of how challenging it is. But that was the path I took, and it worked very well for me and my family. From taking care of things and providing for a family. However, having that view of being a high achiever that required a lot of sacrifice to be successful really colored my life. I was stressed out. I was overwhelmed. I was doing all these things because I thought that's what was required, and it had an impact on how I would show up. When I was when I was a chief actuary, really at the height of my career, all that sacrifice showed up in a rare liver disease.
Wow.
On our subconscious level, we have these programs running, and part of my subconscious programming was to be a good father, to be a good husband, to be a high achiever, I had to sacrifice myself. And it manifested in something in my body. Now, I didn't realize that at the time. I was just going through the motions and doing all the things and trying to hold everything together, feeling like I'm juggling all the balls, spinning all the plates,
Right.
all those little things that we talk about, right?
Right.
And all those things that we say. But here I was at the height of my career, thinking I'm almost there, that this is what I've been striving for. And I went in for a routine doctor checkup and discovered that something wasn't right. and that sent me on a long journey of discovery. It took me about 4 months to figure out what was wrong, and that was a very scary time in my life. That time, I was not worried about being an actuary anymore. I was worried about being alive, and what that might look like. And I discovered that we discovered that I had a rare liver disease called primary sclerosing cholangitis. I know that's a mouthful, so we just call it PSC. PSC. And what that does is, in your body, your bile ducts start to collapse. Your bile ducts are the things that move the bile in and out throughout your liver. The bile gets produced in the liver, and then it gets flushed out of the liver through the bile ducts and into your digestive system, and that's what eats up, helps digest all the food that you take. Well, when the bile ducts collapse, the bile can't get out of the liver. And bile is very corrosive, and so it starts to destroy the liver. So here I was, thinking I've arrived. This is what I've been striving for, and I was given a sentence of basically a death sentence. There is no cure for primary sclerosing cholangitis. It's just a matter of when, right? And how's it going to show up for you?
Right.
And so that was a hard message to take, and a lot of questions around why me? Why is this happening? I've done everything right, and I've got these quotes here for right? I've done everything right in life, and this is my reward? This doesn't seem fair. But I spent 6 years on the transplant list, slowly getting sicker. That's the way the list works. You have to be the sickest person in your region before you're the next person to receive. That was a long, hard time. And for that time, my identity became the guy who was sick. I didn't really like that identity. It was not a fun one to take on. And it felt demoralizing and difficult, right? I'm sure you can imagine. And again, I had no idea. I had no knowledge of the subconscious brain or how things are working or how identity really impacts us. But it was in my recovery, because I received a transplant in 2014, thankfully. I'm here. Yeah, I assume you figured that part out, that something happened, right? I'm a transplant recipient, and in 2014 I received my second chance. I received the gift of life.
Amen, right there.
Yeah, right. And I wasn't happy about it. I was at first. I'm like, all right, yay, I survived, great. And I started to go back to the life I'd already built before. The life of a high achiever who has to sacrifice themselves for success. And I just it wasn't jiving, right? I was like, why? I don't like this life. And I was dealing with a lot of post-traumatic issues after that surgery. It's a very involved and difficult, and I have a scar all the way across my abdomen, my belly. I was like filleted like a fish, so they can get in there and get all that stuff, right? Just picture that. How do you live through that? Somehow the body is resilient. So at the beginning, I was like very grateful that I survived. And then as I started to go back to the life I had created before, like I didn't really like it. And I went through all this trauma and like, why am I here? Well, I may have been better off if I had just died instead of actually lived, because this life is horrible. Now, I had a good life, but this was my story. I had a good job. I have a beautiful wife, 5 amazing kids, things around me that I enjoy, right? But my story was I hated my life, and I lived that way, and I became belligerent. I I was not a good husband. I was not a good father during that time. And it took me a while to realize that the problem wasn't all the things outside of me. It was the view I had of myself and the ideas and my own mind that I wasn't really controlling. And so as I learned about the power of identity and how important it is to be purposeful in who you are and who you're being in the world, I started to reclaim and redefine my being. And that changed everything for me. So that's why I like to talk about the importance of identity and knowing who you are and what you're about in the world as fundamental to really living a life of intention and purpose, as opposed to the things that you're doing. What you do doesn't really matter as much as who you're being in the world.
Wow, I love that, Russell. I want to ask you a question a minute. And so when you were saying, we were saying like in the very beginning, we kind of opened with the first thing people will say is, "What do you do?" Or maybe it's your response is you automatically start in with I have a husband and 5 kids, and I'm a nurse or doctor, whatever. Now, so your story before pre-pivot, pre-big life change, right, would have been I'm a husband, a father of 5, an actuary, very successful, the bling bling around you. Post-pivot, if somebody said, "Tell me about yourself," what would you say now?
I say, are you ready for a conversation? Because, we don't, as people, we are very complex. And a single statement is not enough to really encapsulate who people are being. At the core, though, I believe we are all spirit, right? And that we're all energy, and that we are all connected. We are all connected. And so who am I? Some of the things that stand out about who I am someone who is calm. This is how I bring calm to other people. I generate calm around me. I'm someone who is determined. I've done some hard things in life because I have determination. Right? I value self-reliance. I want people to be able to manage and handle themselves and discover things for themselves. And so I operate that way in the world. I'm a catalyst who helps people and move along in places that they want to move along. Because that's what catalysts do, right? They're reactor. They help reactions take place in a faster method. So those are some of the things that kind of catch a glimpse of who I am, right? What really doesn't tell you anything about what I do. Maybe it does. Maybe it gives some insight into the doing, but
a little bit. But your whole response pre-liver trauma and post-liver survival and thrival, right, is much different. Even though you still have the roles and all that going on, your narrative has changed.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
So Russell, I saw here you wanted to talk about. I love the idea of you talking about the subconscious patterns because, as a cognitive psychologist, I could talk about the brain all day long and not have one bored second. And also the power of the subconscious, because Freud got a little bit of a bad rap. A lot of that stuff is true, but for me, one thing I would keep and not throw the baby out with the bathwater was that he discovered the power of the subconscious, that the unconscious drives the bus, and then roughly 90, I think it's 95% of what we think and feel today, we thought and felt yesterday. So let's hear what it's true, right? And so unless we pull this stuff up into, and yank the blanket off, shine the light on it, we can't change until we have awareness, right? So I'm wondering, maybe you can help us with taking that sort of concept into how you help people sort of help them bring their own limiting beliefs or their own identity, or however you choose to phrase it. So when you're helping the people in businesses, how do you like, where do you start with that? What's the process?
Yeah, so let me share a couple things around that. First of all is a process is understanding how the human operating system actually works, right? And you mentioned 95% of our thoughts, of our feelings, of our actions are really the same thing we had yesterday, right? Where do those come from? They come from our subconscious. And so recognizing and understanding that cycle, that we have these ideas, these beliefs about how life operates and about who we are in the world, and those really impact the things we think about on a moment by moment basis. Our thoughts really drive our feelings, and then our feelings are a place where we act from. I know we like to think we're rational beings, but we're really feeling beings that act out of our feelings. And that all becomes a vicious cycle of reinforcement, right? So that if we have this underlying subconscious idea that I'm not good enough, and this one shows up a lot, right? I'm not good enough.
A common
And
one.
we walk into a new situation, maybe we're going into a room to meet at a networking event, right? And if you have this idea that you're not good enough, well, maybe you aren't so outgoing, and you hide off in the corner, and because you think nobody's going to like me because I'm not good enough. So there's the thoughts. The thoughts start showing up, and the narrative starts showing up in your brain, and then you feel shy and awkward, and you don't even want to engage. And so what's the results of that? Well, you don't meet anybody new, and you feel like, oh, it just sort of reinforces the idea that I'm not good enough. So that's how it operates in our lives. And so you have to start to create some awareness around that and recognize it. So if you have results in your life that you don't like, well, you can work that circle backwards, right? What is it I'm actually feeling? What is it I'm actually thinking? And then when you start to pay attention to your thoughts, then that can actually point you to what the subconscious patterns are. So, maybe you're one of those achievers that feels like they have to do everything themselves, or else it's not going to get done right. Right? That's the thinking that's going on. I have to do it all by myself. Right? And so that points its way towards some sort of subconscious pattern that you're operating with. And you have to start to ask yourselves, is that true?
Right.
And if it's not getting you the results that you want, you don't have to operate under that pattern anymore. Right? So that's one way, is just paying attention, understanding the cycle that we get stuck in, and then pay attention to the thoughts and the feelings that show up. Now, one of the things I also like to talk about is what I call the emotional guidance system.
Okay, all right.
So our emotions are really, I see our emotions as a tool that really helps us understand when our human operating system, that cycle, is working for us and when it's working against us. So let me explain what I mean by that. When you have feelings that don't feel good, like maybe you're sad, maybe you're worried about something, maybe you're feeling anxious. Well, where do those feelings come from? They come from our thinking, right? Our thoughts.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Yeah, that's our thoughts drive our feelings. And so there's something that we're thinking when we have those sort of feelings that's not really lined up with reality. That doesn't really work, right? If I'm thinking I'm not good enough, I'm going to feel like I'm having a feeling that's not very good. And I would argue that feeling, that not good feeling, is there to let you know that thinking, I'm not good enough, is really faulty thinking.
Right.
It's stinky thinking, stinking thinking, as we used to call it when I was a kid. Stinking thinking.
Stinking thinking,
right?
Yeah, that's a 12-step term.
Yeah. And so that's the thing to look at. It's like, oh, well, there you are again. I'm not good enough. Well, that's not true. You know what is true? I am good enough. I'm worthy. My worth doesn't depend on anything I do. It's it's inherent in who I am as a human being, right? That's where my worth comes from. Not anything that I'm going to do out in the world. I can't do anything to add to my worth. I can't do anything to take away from my worth. I'm just worthy. And so when you can look and see, like when you start to say that, I'm worthy, do you feel it? You feel the emotions start to move towards that positive side of the spectrum, right? So I look at the emotional guidance system as if I'm having a feeling that doesn't feel good,
Right.
there's something for me to look at. And when I'm having those feelings that are great, then I'm more in alignment with what's really true.
You're singing my tune, that's for sure. 100%, Russell. This is my
Yeah.
everyday. And I love the word alignment. I love that word so much because I can just picture that, energetically,
Mm.
and because don't you know, at least for me, like when I'm in the flow zone, the passion, the flow zone,
Yeah.
you just feel like everything is right between you, God, if it's God or universe or whatever you choose to call that.
Right,
But for me,
right.
I feel like I'm at one with everything. Like I
Yes.
just, when I'm in the zone, I just feel like there's
Yeah.
no separation. It's just, I am the writing, I am the speaking, I am the whatever.
Mm. Yeah. I got it. Yeah. Beautiful.
No feeling
I like
like
to
it.
I like to really help my clients understand that what we're really about is managing our nervous system,
Oh, totally.
right? Because like when we're in that fight or flight response, then we aren't really in control. The mechanisms are taking over. The human operating system is taking over to keep you alive. And so many times we put ourselves in that simply from the things we think.
Oh, yes.
I've got too much to do. All right. Right? Now suddenly my nervous system is going into this space of, oh, there's a threat there. There's too much to do. Whatever that
Right,
means.
right,
Right? Whatever that threat is, that threat's there, and so I got to protect this body from that threat of too much to do. And it
Right.
goes into fight or flight. And we call that overwhelm.
Right.
That's that
And
sensation
it's
of
so
overwhelm.
primal, right,
Yes,
Russell? It's
definitely.
that thing. I love that. I forget who was making this analogy, but I've heard it a bunch of times. That it is so primal because the fight or flight was back when we were being chased into our caves
Yes.
for an actual something chasing us, and now
Hmm.
that response is the same as, "Oh no, I didn't get the email to the holiday party. Oh no, I forgot to respond to my boss," which is not the same thing as being chased by a prehistoric predator. Like they're
Right.
not the same level.
Yeah, they're not. But we put ourselves in that primal state all the time. That primal state. And so when you can recognize that you're there, that's the opportunity. That's the opportunity to grow, to start to see what the subconscious programming is that you're operating under, and to start to do something different about it.
Right.
But
And,
you have to become aware, and you have to start to recognize those patterns.
right. And I definitely agree with you, Russell, basically with everything you're saying. And also because it's a plain and simple truth that we can't do what we don't know yet, right? So the first,
Yep.
we can't, it's not even possible. So the awareness is huge, like to listen, have solitude, right? And really
Mm-hmm.
talk, that monkey chatter is saying something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's coming from the vault, right? So to kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
get still and hear it so that we can make the shift.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that.
And I like to reinforce to pay attention to your emotions and look at the
Yes.
results you're having in life, and where you aren't getting the results you want,
Right,
that's
right.
also an opportunity to look back, right? If because at the end of the day, all of it is coming from what's going on between your two ears.
Oh, 100%. And speaking of what's going on between that lovely 3-pound organ of the brain, I love this because, as we mentioned, Russell, I could talk about neurons and neuroplasticity all day long, and I have one board second. So I know on your list of things you wanted to talk about, you had, to help our listeners learn how to leverage, make it work for you, the neuroplasticity, because the brain is so malleable. It's just a
Yes.
resilience machine. How our listeners can leverage neuroplasticity to help reprogram some of these blockades, these limiting beliefs that just get us so stuck. Maybe you can
Yes.
help us with what to do.
Absolutely. I'd love to share what to do. And there is some doing because we have to create new neural pathways in our brain.
Right.
And that happens through practice. 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 So what are the things we need to be practicing? Well, what I help my clients with is, one, we want to identify what is that thing that's in the way, the belief that's in the way. So if there is, I'm not good enough, running around in your subconscious program, right? That's the thing to know. And then you have to make a decision around what it is you want to replace it with. And I often recommend replacing it with something of the opposite or something that will actually help you get the results that you want in life. So the opposite of I'm not good enough is I am good enough. Or maybe it's just I am worthy. I'm
Right,
worthy, and there's
right.
nothing that anything can do or anyone can do that will change my worthiness, right? It's just a fundamental part of who I am. I am worthy. Now, that may just sound like an affirmation, right? You're like, oh, well, aren't you just talking about affirmations? The reason affirmations fall flat a lot of times is because we don't truly believe them.
Right.
And so the hard part here, the thing that you have to do is you have to start to look at your life and see the reasons why this new belief, this new decision is actually true. I call that gathering the evidence. And when you start to gather the evidence, you actually start to make the connections that say, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, that's right. And so that's what really starts to change the neural pathways in your brain, is because you have to believe it. And so you start to explore that. So I am worthy. What makes me worthy, right? It's inherent in who I am. I can't do anything about it. That's part of the evidence. If you are someone who believes in biblical texts or religious texts, right? They all speak towards the fact that we're inherently worthy, right?
Yes.
There's lots of evidence. If you can't find the evidence in your own life, you start to look at evidence in other people's lives, right? And it's through this practice of gathering the evidence that you really start to convince yourself that it's true. So it's no longer just an affirmation. It's inherent truth. And when you see it for what it really is, and like that old stuff is just bad programming. I call them bugs, right? They're bugs in our human operating system, right? That
Computer virus.
that sort of falls away. But you have to practice it because those neural pathways have been trained for a long time, and it's easy for them to fire off. I like to use the visual. I live out in some rural land here, and so you can see where the farmers will drive out into their field, right? They always drive the same channel in the field, and it creates these big ruts in the field. You seen that before?
Yeah, well, we're in northern Vermont,
Right.
so yes.
Yeah, right? That's
Only
like a neural
all the time.
pathway.
Yeah.
That's a neural pathway. So if you
Right.
want to create a new neural pathway, you have to really start a new trail. And it's going to take a while for the old one to kind of fill in as it's no longer used. And you start to create the new one through repeated use. And so what happens, you're going to make a new decision. I'm worthy. You're going to come up across a situation where your brain starts to go, oh, I'm not good enough. And you have to be aware to say, that's just a thought. That's not me. I don't believe in that old thought anymore. What I believe is that I am worthy. And remember, all these reasons why I'm worthy, and you start to list them off in your own head so that you reinforce that idea until it becomes who you are, right? Yeah, so that's how it's about. The evidence is the key component to really start to change your brain. Now, if you want to fertilize the field a little to make it easier, I love the practice of gratitude, because gratitude opens us up.
100%.
Right, and it makes the brain more malleable. Like, one of my favorite practices, particularly when I'm in a place where things seem challenging, or I don't like what's going on, it can easily move me into a primal state. What I like to do is ask myself, what is there to be grateful for in this situation? The situation I don't like, right? What is there to be grateful for in that? And it's one of the things that is the quickest shifter of energy that I've found, which will get your minds off the problems, which is where it generates all that negative energy, is we're focused on problems, and gets you focused on what actually is serving you. And that starts to generate that positive energy. And in that space, when you're in that sort of space, then the brain becomes more malleable and more open to seeing other possibilities, and more open to changing the structure through neuroplasticity.
Oh, I tell you, Russell, you're singing my tune, because, I mean, some people think, oh, it's woo-woo, and no, we can actually see in an fMRI, I'm sure you're aware, we can see brain changes. Gratitude is the master key to happiness. There's just no question.
Yeah.
That was repetition.
Gratitude was the thing that really transformed my life. After I was in my recovery, and I was in this space of I hate my life, I hate everything, that was my story. A friend, a mentor, challenged me to write down 3 things I'm grateful for every day. And to not just make them platitudes, but to really feel into the gratitude. And so I started that. And I was one of those skeptics who's like, this isn't going to do anything. Like, whatever. But I was a high achiever, and I was going to do whatever it took to be, to make the achievement. So I'm like, okay, I'll do my 3 things every day. And every morning I would start with the statement, I'm grateful to be alive. Now, I was not grateful to be alive. I was actually hating my life at the time. But I would write that every morning. And then I'd find a couple other things to be grateful for. The birds chirping outside my window because, spring's coming, or whatever it was. My coffee mug because it's helping perk me up for the day. Whatever it was, I would find a couple other things. And in the beginning, it was super challenging. It got easier over time. And one day, after I wrote, I'm grateful to be alive, I looked up and I realized, you know what? I actually am.
There you go.
I actually am grateful to be alive. My life has changed, and so many things to be grateful for. And I've been writing out things to be grateful for months, right? But I really felt it, and it's like, oh, you know what? I am so grateful to be alive. That's what convinced me of the power of gratitude and how it can be transformative. Like, I was writing the thing, I didn't even believe it at the time. Right? Over and over until I did believe it. And I did feel it. And it was who I became.
It's so huge. It's so huge, Russell. Like I said, some people think it's woo-woo and that's not going to fix anything, and they get into their whole thing because they're in that negative. I've seen it transform people over and over and over again. And it's actually neurochemistry. And then, I explain to them it's neuroplasticity. I love that word. And then it's actually Darwinian, because I love how the more we shift into and lean into gratitude, also like those ruts you were talking about, those negative pathways, it's if you don't use it, you lose it. So while we're becoming more positive, not using the negative Nelly rut paths, they start to go away. Just like we trim bushes in April, and so you're kind of doing it both at the same time, and it's life changing.
Yeah. Yes.
It's
Yes, it
absolutely
is.
beautiful. So, okay, so Russell, so lastly, you kind of answered this, but let's just see if you have any little nugget left for the listeners about, you have something about, gratitude's probably the biggest tool, I'm guessing, for you, right? And awareness and gratitude, 'cause we can't do what we don't know. Do you have anything else to
Right.
help listeners? Because the listeners are coming from all different walks and all across the world, by the way. I probably forgot to mention that.
Right.
But all over the place. A lot of them are in we have a group of young listeners. A lot are in like the 40s, 50s, 60s. That could probably relate pretty well to what you're saying about stepping into their own next level. Like if they're having this huge aha moment right now, even though it's a different context than with your liver, and they're like, "Oh my God, I get this guy. I don't want to identify the way I'm identifying anymore." And like, what would be your something to help them step into it?
Yeah. So I think the one thing that we haven't talked about that is also a very powerful tool is you have to spend some time visualizing. Our brain is a goal-achieving machine, and it works off visuals. And so if you can start to visualize what life looks like, the life that you desire, the life that you want to step into, that starts to set the foundation for it actually becoming your reality. And so spending time in that, and I'm sure you're aware there are lots of studies about the power of visualization, and
Oh,
I
yes.
could give a couple examples of how athletes use this idea of visualization so that they can get better at the game. Like sitting there doing free throws for the basketball, you can visualize making those throws, and it's almost as effective as actually doing the practice of the throws.
Yes.
Right? They've studied pianists who visualize playing certain piano pieces, and they look at their brain, and then when they sit down to actually play the piano piece and record the brain, those look almost identical. So
Yes.
visualizing is a way of basically playing your future now. And if you spend time in that and visualize it, and then in the midst of that, ask yourself, who do I need to become to create that, to create what you truly want? And so it's spending time in that visual state of imagining it, being there. Imagination is a superpower, right?
Oh,
Right? It's like,
100%.
wasn't it Albert Einstein said that it's the most powerful force in
yeah.
the universe? Imagination, right? And then asking yourself, who do I need to become? Who do I need to become to be that, to create that life?
I love
And
that. Russell. And
that
believe
helps
it
you
is
step into it.
believing it, right? And isn't there an element, correct me if I'm wrong, where you believe it, but and what goes on with the visualization, but also actually feeling the emotion
Yes.
of the
Yes.
feeling like without attachment to outcome, but just feeling the greatness of whatever's happening is happening.
Yes. Yes. Feeling is part of the fertilization process,
The miracle
right?
grow of manifestation.
Yes, it is the miracle grow manifestation. You need to trademark that.
That just rolled out of me, Russell. It must be our, because I knew from the very beginning, I just, had to get to know you a little bit better. Because I knew from like day one that you were a deep seed. The martial arts had me, the whole thing. So this has been fantastic. I think you're going to definitely change lives. Literally, the listeners are, last I checked, it was 52 countries that where it's being listened
Wow.
to. Different, all over the place. So, we may never know that, but you can know right now on this show that you've definitely caused some light bulbs to go on just by your very generous share with your life minute. So I'd like to thank you for being on the Mindcraft podcast, Russell.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Okay. And just lastly, listeners, if you'd like to contact Russell, for business coaching, speaking, continuing conversation, anything like that, Russell is going to provide me with his contact information and website, which will be right in the blurb beneath this video, and you can catch up with him then. Okay, thank you.